It's party time!
Viva Pinata, filled with fun.
Filled with fun!
Don't be enjoying them. Viva Pinata, filled with fun.
Filled with fun!
Viva Pinata, don't be enjoying them.
Carl and Damon here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short, and it is They Made What into a TV series. Viva Pinata! Viva Pinata! Something, 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 party animals.
Yeah, something
Something like that. We skip it. It's like a minute-long introduction, and once you've heard it once, you never want to hear it again. Indeed, but we're finding out already, and we're only up to episode number 5. This aired in September 23rd, 2006 to 2 segments, because remember, never forget, 2 segments that are unconnected. Basically 2 separate episodes into one.
Yep.
And here we have Trojan Horstachio, and the pinatas must be crazy. Yes,
Yep.
yes. It's going to be a long 52 weeks.
Indeed.
Segment 1, Trojan Horstachio. We start by seeing lots of pinatas making the island look nice before we arrived at home of Professor Pester. This is the first time we see Professor Pester.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of forgot he was a thing in the game. You kind of forget that actually the game has these villainous characters. He comes in, breaks your pinatas and stuff like that and so on. The ruffians and all of that. You kind of forget all of that.
Yeah, you do, yeah.
And he is telling his ruffians about his plan. Phase 1 is to disguise themselves as a female Horstachio to beguile Hudson. Phase 2, his second greatest invention of evil cunning, a cute fake house. He doesn't get much of a reaction from the ruffians until he reveals the fake Horstachio inside. They, being idiots, because that's what they are, they're goons basically, think he has captured Hudson, so pick him up to celebrate. He then shows them what will happen once they have Hudson, and he'll be smashed to bits so they can get his candy. So it's one of those. He's that kind of guy. I want to get the pinatas. Oh.
Yes, yeah.
But he's got a catchphrase that I was like, oh, and I was looking at the date of it, and of course, if you've seen Family Guy, you're like, wait, okay, Family Guy, back in the early season, Stewie Griffin, victory will be mine.
Oh, no, I didn't realise that was his catchphrase, but yeah.
What, who? Stewie?
I know Stewie Family Guy.
Yeah, well, I noticed it here and going ahead, but he will say victory will be mine a lot going on as well. So it's basically a thing. With the pinatas now, Fergie is begging Hudson to go to a party in his place. Hudson is booked solid though, so he can't. And Langston points out if Hudson won't go, Fergie will have to do. So Fergie starts to beg Langston instead, but he doesn't have much to offer basically. It's just a whole, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. Yep. He's got nothing. Paulie intervenes, pointing out Fergie is fragile, but Langston obviously sees that as a positive. He's a pinata. Yeah. This whole smashing them to bits thing still freaks me out. It's weird.
It's like quite horrible.
It is quite horrible. Desperate, Fergie heads off with Paulie to find another Horstachio. Meanwhile, Pester and the ruffians are in their disguise, but trip over in front of Hudson. Hudson is concerned and helps her up, where he introduces himself, and after Pester says victory is mine, Hudson hears that and thinks her name is Victory.
Yes.
But it does actually work, because he's like, my name's Hudson.
Yep.
He's like, victory is mine. So it does sound like, yeah. Hudson agrees to accompany her home and is led to a trap, but it's too much for a gentleman to go into the house first. So this is a bit like silliness back and forth.
Yep.
After some silly bits involving a hay bar, Pester continues to pressure Hudson until he almost goes in on a promise of a romantic dinner. But he ends up stopping, as he needs to go and get some of his poetry. Convenient.
Very well.
Heading off home with Pester and the ruffians in pursuit. At Hudson's house, he's reading some of his poetry to Pester. It's not really poetry, though, as Pester rightfully points out, it's press reviews about how great Hudson is. And no matter how hard Pester tries, Hudson is constantly finding something to avoid going to the dinner because he's so vain. Yep. So it's not like he knows, he's not aware of Pester or it being a fake Horstachio, he's just so vain.
Yeah, he's just trying, he's showing off. Yeah.
He insists on showing her all the trophies he has won and starts to explain what he won each one for, resulting in Pester being buried under a mound of them. More silly touches as Hudson notices her butt has fallen asleep. So, like, it's Pester in the front with, like, 2 or 3 ruffians making up a tell, that kind of thing. And the last ruffian has got so bored he fell asleep in the back part of it. And Hudson suggests they dance to help wake it up. Hudson drags her onto the dance floor and Pester starts to think Hudson is insane. as the ruffians are bad. So Pester's now beginning to freak out, thinking like, this guy's insane. This isn't working. We're getting really hurt here. Fergie now arrives and begs Hudson to go to the party, but Hudson refuses again. Langston, in hot pursuit, arrives and demands Fergie go, but Pester declares that he will go instead, as he's now just completely desperate to get away from Hudson. So the plan is completely backfired. Hudson, though in love, tries to stop her, but they desperately run off as Hudson laments meeting someone so amazing before he's distracted by a mirror of himself because he's so vain.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. He gets launched into the sky. Pester says, I regret nothing, as he gets sent to a party, and that's that. It's a fun introduction to Pester, really. The whole concept is incredibly silly, but that is par for the course, really.
I mean, like I said, it's a 10-minute episode. It's funny.
Our reviews of these are always going to be super light because there's no analysis needed here. What we are analysing, the story, it's fine. The animation we've talked about enough times. It looks good. The voice acting is strong. I like Pester and the ruffians in this. Yep. It's a solid segment.
Yeah, it's the same every episode.
It's going to be like that. Yeah.
Much,
That's kind of why it's a talk through, really, more than anything else.
Yep.
Segment 2, the pinatas must be crazy. The great Bonbon is addressing a crowd of supporters, giving them words of wisdom. Paulie is watching and points out that it's a scam, but all the other pinatas are convinced by the great Bonbon, having bought his book. Paulie tries to throw him off, but he just ends up annoying everyone. He asks the great Bonbon a question, the Bonbon sees it coming and just throws him off completely. The pinata alarm isn't heard, and everyone heads off to find out what is going on. Pinata alarm?
Oh, no.
Okay, that's new. At Pinata Central, Ella arrives back from a party with a balloon animal in her hand. And everyone freaks out as they don't know what it is, and Langston is annoyed that she broke the rules by bringing something back. She doesn't even remember going on a trip. I will use this opportunity to say, Ella, if I'm talking favourite characters, Ella's up there, because the whole forgetfulness thing is used in a very funny way.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, and she's got a light.
Voice isn't quite nice. Yeah, absolutely. Alongside Ella, I quite like Paulie because he's kind of not convinced by some of the other things. Like at this point as well, I think our major player really is Fergie more than anyone else because Fergie's often in the most of them.
He seems to be the main character.
Langston reminds the pinatas about the dangers of the outside world. This is being watched through a pair of binoculars by the great Bonbon. Knowing what it is, he decides to use his advantage. So the Bonbon sees the inflatable balloon animal and knows exactly what it is. He comes over and declares that it's a supreme being called Pinator. Everyone's obviously like, oh. Yep. Paulie is sceptical. But when the great Bonbon reshapes into different animals and a 6-cylinder engine, that was weird.
Very weird.
They got weird moments like that. Everyone is convinced and starts bowing down. Great Bonbon convinces them all to build Pinator, a shrine, and acts like the squeaks of the balloon as he touches it are words that only he can talk to it. He claims that Pinator wants Hudson to do a dance called a Candy Can, which results in the great Bonbon being showered with candy. He then gets the rest of the pinatas to do the dance while Paulie watches on with disgust. So yeah, it's a scam.
Yeah.
Later, it's all got a bit culty, is the word I would use. Yes. Culty. And the only one who doesn't believe is Paulie. He tries to convince Fergie that the Bonbon is lying to them and pointing out that all it wants is candy. Franklin arrives and says that all the pinatas have been summoned. It turns out, according to the Bonboon, that Pinator is angry. He claims that Pinator is insulted by the lack of candy they are producing. Using the balloon animal to scare the pinatas off, and after we see them taking all their candy and bringing it to the Bonboon, who stuffs his face. So yes. During one of his feasts, Pinator is dropped and falls down to Paulie, who thinks it proves he was right. Because look, it's just lying there. He shows the other pinatas that Pinator is a harmless thing by batting it away with his tail, which initially freaks out the others, but now they're like, oh, okay. Maybe it's true.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah. The Bonbon tries to pull it back, though, and make Pinator more scary. But as he continues to inflate it to make it bigger, trying to scare people and trying to convince Paulie that it's real, it gets so big, and Paulie pulls out a needle. And, Bonboon kind of realises, oh, this is going to go bad.
That's it, done, yeah.
Outside, Paulie thinks he's convinced him that Pinator was fake as the Bonboon lands in the background. However, Fergie thinks Pinator is amazing because when it blows up, it rains candy. All the candy goes flying down through it. And so, yeah. And I noticed that's a bit of a running theme. That often Fergie always seems to come away still convinced of things.
Yes,
more than convinced of the great Bomboon's wonderfulness.
Yeah, he seems like he's the most gullible.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, proper, yeah.
But it's definitely, you can tell, they really put a lot of weight behind, maybe because of the voice actor for Fergie and so on.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, these both segments are fine. There's
Yeah.
nothing that memorable here, nothing that clever, nothing that's interesting or funny, or like, it's just got these weird moments, like I said, the creation of the 6-cylinder engine as a balloon animal. It's just like, it's go, huh? Okay. Weird stuff like that. But, you know, I am getting more and more vibes as a watcher of like, oh yeah, they did want to keep this tied into the games, you know, as much as possible. Like, you are going to recognise things from the games and musical cues and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely going forward in the later episodes too.
Yeah, it's going to grow even more so. That's episode 5. Trojan Horstachio and the Pinatas must be crazy. You got any thoughts on this one? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?